This Sunday presents the third and last instruction to the catechumens. 2 Sundays ago, you may remember, we had the first instruction, and it was given through the symbolism of water, where Jesus asks for a drink from the Samaritan woman at the well, which referred to the waters of baptism, the spring of water welling up to eternal life. But also, it referred to the cleansing through the sacrament of penance when we go to confession. And then last Sunday, we heard Deacon James speak on the symbolism of light in the healing of the blind man, where the light of the living truth and living that truth in the midst of the darkness of our world was impressed upon us. And today we focus our attention on life. Every year at the Easter Vigil, these three elements, water, light, and life, come together. First, we encounter water at the baptismal font, and then we encounter Christ, who is our light in the Easter light. And then we finally encounter life in the risen Christ, who is our life. So in each of us, there is Jesus and Lazarus. So by this I mean that through our baptism, we became other Christs, a priest, prophet, and king. And, like Lazarus, we are either dead or dying, whether it be physically, spiritually, emotionally, financially, or whatever. In each one of us, there is something either dead or dying. Because many of us are locked up like Lazarus in the tomb. And Jesus is saying to us, Lazarus, come out. Some of us are locked up in fear, hopelessness, and darkness. Jesus is calling us to come out of our fears, out of our hopelessness, out of our darkness. Did you ever wonder why Jesus waited 4 days after Lazarus died before he intervened? They came to him and said, "He's sick." But he didn't intervene when he heard that Lazarus was sick. The gospel says, it is for the glory of God. So let's try to remember what's gone on before the raising of Lazarus. Remember, Jesus had raised 2 other people. First, he raised the daughter of Jairus. But in that case, the little girl had just died, and she came back to life. In the second case, it was the son of the widow of Nain. And at that point, that boy had been put in the casket, but he hadn't yet been buried. But in the case of Lazarus, Jesus gave life to Lazarus after he was in the tomb for 4 days. So the point is, with God, there's no barriers. With Lazarus, it took place when all hope seemed to have been lost. So the point is that with God, there is no hopeless case, even in the grave. St. Paul said that the power of God is made known in our weakness. God is always at his best when we are at our worst. God is always up to something when we are up to nothing. When Jesus told them to roll the stone, some of the people thought that Jesus wanted to see the face of Lazarus for one last time. So they were quick to remind Jesus that Lazarus had already been in that tomb for 4 days. That is significant, because at that time, people believed that after death, the spirit of that person kind of hovered around the body for 3 days. But on the 4th day, the body begins to decompose beyond recognition. And so on the 4th day, the spirit would be gone. And the face of the person would not be recognized. But to their amazement, Lazarus was brought back to life. So the miracle of raising Lazarus happened in a place called Bethany. The name Lazarus means God helps. The name Bethany means house of affliction. So God helps and house of affliction. So do you see that the story here is not just about the raising of that single man called Lazarus, but beyond that, this story is about how God comes to help those who live in a house of afflictions. It is about how God comes and helps us in our afflictions. And we all experience different forms of afflictions. In some homes, the family is already lifeless because dad and mom are not on talking terms anymore. Dad and mom are ignoring each other. And so the family is lifeless. In some homes, the affliction is a teenager or someone who is struggling with addiction to drugs or alcohol or who knows what. For some, it is the same sin that we bring to the confessional over and over again. We keep going back to that same sin all the time. For some, it may be a terminal illness. For some, it may be a job loss. Others, financial challenges. Or for others, not being on good terms with the other members of your family. In all of these afflictions, I remind you that your name is Lazarus. So invite Jesus that he may come to your house of affliction. Martha said to Jesus, "If only you had been here, my brother would not have died." At first, that sounds kind of like an expression of disappointment and perhaps even anger. But Martha didn't stop there. She went on to make a profession of faith. She said, "But even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give it to you." So at this moment, we may share Martha's sentiment, anger, disappointment, whatever, but let's not stop there. Let's share in her faith also and say, even now, whatever you ask of God for our sake, God will do it for you. So regarding Lazarus, Jesus said to him, or said to the people, "This illness will not end in death. It is for the glory of God." But contrary to what Jesus said, Lazarus indeed died. But 4 days later, Jesus brought him back to life. And herein lies the glory of God. Because nothing is a barrier before God, not even death. The last word must always come from God. Even when Jesus is 4 days late, he's still on time. When Jesus brought Lazarus back to life, Lazarus didn't live in this world forever. He still died, just like each one of us are going to die. But the raising of Lazarus from the dead was not the end goal in itself. The raising of Lazarus was a way of preparing for what Jesus would ultimately do for all of us, and that is to give us eternal life, to ensure that we do not face eternal death. That's the most important thing that Jesus came to do. The reality is we're all going to die. But what matters is, will we face eternal death or eternal life? In the various homes of afflictions, Jesus is calling us, Lazarus, come out. Death is not the greatest loss that we experience in our life. The greatest loss that we experience in our lives is what we allow to die in us while we are still alive.